For over a century, one dinosaur has occupied the top of the hierarchy, the apex, the standard, the animal every other predatory dinosaur is measured against. Tyrannosaurus Rex. The name alone carries a kind of authority that no other prehistoric animal has matched. The fossil record has something to say about that authority. T-Rex was real. Its size was real. A confirmed length of approximately 12 meters. A confirmed mass somewhere between 8 and 14 metric tons, depending on the specimen and the method used to estimate it. Bite force among the highest of any confirmed land predator in the fossil record. The broad picture is not in dispute, but T-Rex did not live alone in the fossil record, and the animal that the evidence places above it. Not in the same time, not in the same place, but in the same conversation about scale, is not the animal most people name when asked what exceeded a T-Rex. Because most people do not know it existed, not in the form the fossil record actually describes. What was the largest predatory dinosaur that ever lived on this planet? Not the most famous, not the most studied, the largest. The answer has changed 3 times in the last 30 years. Each time it changed, the animal that took the top position was stranger than the one it replaced. More specialized, more difficult to categorize, more poorly understood despite being larger than anything beside it. The animal is called Spinosaurus, and the version you think you know is wrong. In this video, you will learn what Spinosaurus actually was. Not the version from the movie, not the early reconstructions. The animal the fossil record has been slowly and painstakingly revealing across more than a century of incomplete, disputed, and revised evidence. You will learn why it exceeded T-Rex in scale, how it was built differently from every other large carnivorous dinosaur, what the evidence suggests about how it lived, and why the story of Spinosaurus is not just the story of a bigger predator. It is the story of a predatory dinosaur that the standard model of carnivorous dinosaur biology did not have a category for. An animal that appears in the fossil record looking like the answer to a question no one had thought to ask. What happens when the largest predatory dinosaur is not primarily a land animal? The title of largest predatory dinosaur has changed hands more than once in the history of paleontology. For most of the 20th century, it belonged to T-Rex. Then, in the 1990s, fossil material from Argentina introduced Giganotosaurus carolinii, a large theropod confirmed at or slightly above T-Rex in total length. Then Carcharodontosaurus saharicus from North Africa added another candidate at comparable scale. The measurements overlapped. The differences between the top candidates were small enough that researchers debated which animal technically held the record. And then Spinosaurus was revised, and the gap opened. Current estimates, based on the most complete fossil material available, place Spinosaurus aegyptiacus at approximately 14 to 15 meters in length in many current reconstructions, possibly longer in exceptional individuals. If those reconstructions hold as more material is recovered, Spinosaurus is the longest predatory dinosaur we currently have evidence for, and among the largest by any measure. That caveat matters, and we will return to it. But the scale of the gap between Spinosaurus and the next largest candidates is significant enough that it does not depend on resolving every uncertainty in the current models. But size is not the most interesting thing about Spinosaurus. Not even close. The most interesting thing about Spinosaurus is what it tells us about the limits of the categories we use to understand predatory dinosaurs. Because Spinosaurus was not simply a larger version of the theropod predator template. It was a different kind of animal altogether, built for a different environment, operating on a different ecological logic, equipped with features that no other large carnivorous dinosaur possessed. And that took over a century of incomplete fossil evidence to begin to understand correctly. This is the full story of that animal. And it begins with a discovery that was made, then lost, then partially remade, and is still being completed today. Spinosaurus aegyptiacus was first described in 1915 by Ernst Stromer von Reichenbach, a German paleontologist working from fossil material recovered in Egypt's Bahariya Formation. The material was fragmentary, partial vertebrae, jaw fragments, some limb material, enough to establish a new species, not enough to understand what the animal actually was. Stromer described a large carnivorous dinosaur with elongated neural spines, the bony projections rising from the vertebrae along the back, forming a distinctive sail or crest that had no equivalent in any other known dinosaur. The spines were long, exceptionally long, some reaching heights of approximately 1.5 meters above the vertebral body itself. What that structure was for, whether a sail for thermoregulation, a hump for fat storage, a display structure for social communication, or something else entirely, remains actively debated in the scientific literature today. No consensus has been reached. What is not in debate is that nothing else like it appears in the carnivorous dinosaur record. Stromer's original specimens were housed in Munich. In April 1944, Allied bombing destroyed the museum that contained them. The original Spinosaurus material, the physical fossils on which the species description was based, was lost entirely. What remained were Stromer's notes, his illustrations, his published descriptions, enough to know the animal existed, not enough to know what it really looked like. For decades, Spinosaurus existed in the fossil record as little more than a name and a fragmentary description. Known to be large, known to be distinctive, not well enough understood to place it accurately in the hierarchy of carnivorous dinosaurs. That began to change in 2014, when Nizar Ibrahim and his colleagues published a description of new Spinosaurus material from the Kem beds of Morocco, material that included partial skull elements, vertebrae, limb bones, and crucially, pelvic and hind limb material that had not been available in Stromer's original specimens. The 2014 reconstruction placed Spinosaurus at approximately 14 meters in length, but it also proposed something that changed the conversation about this animal permanently. The hind limbs were short, proportionally short in a way that no other large theropod's hind limbs were short. The feet were broad and flat. The bones of the foot showed features consistent with an animal that spent significant time in water, not an animal built for pursuit across open ground. The 2014 paper proposed that Spinosaurus was a semi-aquatic predator, an animal that operated primarily in and around water, hunting in rivers, wading, possibly swimming, rather than pursuing large prey across land in the manner of T-Rex or Giganotosaurus. The response from the scientific community was not uniform. Some researchers accepted the semi-aquatic hypothesis readily. Others challenged the reconstruction, questioning whether the hind limb proportions were accurately represented, whether the specimen was fully mature, whether the functional interpretations of the foot morphology were sufficiently supported by the available material. The debate that followed was active, specific, and productive. In 2020, additional material was published, tail vertebrae from a Spinosaurus specimen in Morocco that provided new evidence for the semi-aquatic model. The tail was tall and laterally flattened, a shape consistent with propulsion through water, similar in mechanical principle to the tails of modern crocodilians. Not a tail built for a fast-running land predator. A tail built, the evidence suggests, for moving efficiently through water. The 2020 tail material did not end the debate, but it shifted the weight of evidence more clearly toward the semi-aquatic interpretation and added a specific, testable anatomical argument to what had previously been a more inference-based discussion. Here is where the Spinosaurus story becomes genuinely important beyond the question of size. The fossil record of Spinosaurus has been built from fragmentary material across multiple sites, multiple researchers, and over a century of collection. It has been revised repeatedly. It will almost certainly be revised again as more material is recovered. Current size estimates and behavioral interpretations represent the best available synthesis of incomplete evidence, not a finished picture. What the evidence does establish with reasonable confidence. Spinosaurus is among the largest predatory dinosaurs known, and in many current reconstructions, the longest. It was built differently from every other large theropod predator. with proportions, skull design, and anatomical features that point consistently toward a lifestyle centered on water rather than open land. And it lived in an ecosystem that the fossil record of the Chem beds describes as unusually dense with large predators, for reasons that are themselves worth examining carefully. To understand what made Spinosaurus unusual, not just large, but genuinely unlike other large carnivorous dinosaurs, you need to compare it directly to the theropod template it departed from. The large carnivorous theropods, T-Rex, Giganotosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, Allosaurus in an earlier period, share a recognizable body plan. Massive hind limbs built for power and some degree of speed. A large, heavily built skull with robust teeth in most of the later large forms. Short forelimbs relative to body size. A stiff tail counterbalancing a forward-leaning body. A center of gravity placed over the hind limbs. An animal built to move on land, to pursue or ambush large prey on land, and to process large prey with a powerful bite. Spinosaurus departed from that template in almost every significant feature. Start with the skull. Spinosaurus had an elongated, narrow, low skull, sometimes described as crocodile-like in its proportions. Not the deep, robust skull of T-Rex. A long, narrow snout suited for fast, precise strikes into water to catch fish. Not for delivering bone-crushing bites to large terrestrial prey. The teeth were conical and interlocking. Not the blade-like, serrated teeth of a large, flesh-cutting theropod. Teeth suited for gripping, slippery prey. The dentition of an animal for which fish constituted a significant portion of the diet. Isotopic analysis of Spinosaurus tooth material has supported this interpretation. The chemical signature consistent with a diet heavily tied to aquatic food sources. No single feature proves a lifestyle. The case is cumulative. The forelimbs were large and robust, unusually so for a large theropod, with curved claws well suited to capturing prey rather than the reduced forelimbs of a T-Rex. The hind limbs, as the 2014 material showed, were proportionally short, the feet broad, the overall architecture of the lower body inconsistent with an animal built for sustained terrestrial locomotion at the scale of its confirmed body size. A predatory dinosaur of this length with short legs is not a pursuit predator in the T-Rex mold. It is an animal whose mass is supported by a different medium than ground. Water. The nostrils of Spinosaurus were positioned further back on the skull than in most large theropods, closer to the eyes rather than at the tip of the snout. This positioning is found in semi-aquatic animals that need to breathe while the tip of the snout is submerged. Crocodilians. Some aquatic birds. Animals for which the snout functions in water while the rest of the skull remains above the surface. The nasal openings in Spinosaurus are not positioned for an animal whose face is primarily in air. The density of the bones, particularly the limb bones, was relatively high for a theropod of its size. Dense bones reduce buoyancy. They are a feature of animals that need to remain submerged rather than float. Modern crocodilians have dense bones for the same reason. So do penguins. So do hippos. Animals whose ecological role requires them to stay in water rather than ride its surface. Put these features together: the skull shape, the tooth design, the nostril position, the hind limb proportions, the bone density, the tail morphology, and the picture they produce is consistent. Not beyond ongoing scientific debate. Not confirmed by every researcher who has examined the material, but consistent enough that the semi-aquatic model currently represents the weight of available evidence rather than a minority hypothesis. Spinosaurus is among the largest predatory dinosaurs currently known from the fossil record, and it was built, the evidence suggests, primarily for water, not as a secondary habitat, not as an occasional refuge. Water as the primary operational environment of a predatory dinosaur larger than any land predator this planet has produced in the last 66 million years. That is not the T-Rex model. That is not the Giganotosaurus model. That is not any model that the standard framework for carnivorous dinosaur biology had prepared the scientific community for. It is something genuinely new in the record. An animal built in a way that the largest predatory dinosaurs, before and after it, were not built. A predatory dinosaur of extraordinary confirmed size, built around a lifestyle that was not primarily terrestrial. If this is changing how you picture the largest predatory dinosaur that the fossil record has described, subscribe now, because the next chapter moves from what Spinosaurus was to the ecosystem it occupied, and that ecosystem has its own story to tell. To understand Spinosaurus in full, not just its anatomy, but its ecological reality, you need to understand the Kem beds. The formation in what is now Morocco and Algeria that has produced more Spinosaurus material than any other site, and that has produced, alongside Spinosaurus, a fossil assemblage that occupies a specific place in how paleontologists discuss Cretaceous ecosystems. The Kem beds date to approximately 95 million years ago. Mid-Cretaceous, the environment they preserve was a vast river delta system, warm, shallow, enormously productive, fed by rivers crossing what is now the Sahara toward the ancient Tethys Sea. Not a jungle, not a dry savanna. A dense, complex, river-dominated landscape full of waterways, floodplains, and shallow coastal zones. The precise ecosystem that Spinosaurus's anatomy was built for. And it was not the only large predator there. The Kem beds have produced fossil material from Dinosaurus saharicus, a large carnivorous theropod in the T-Rex size range, confirmed in the same formation at the same time period. Large crocodilians inhabited the same waterways. Giant sawfish, large predatory fish, an aquatic food web dense enough to support a predator of Spinosaurus's confirmed size. The Kem assemblage is often described as unusually predator-heavy for a Cretaceous formation. That impression is worth treating carefully. The formation is time-averaged, meaning the fossils it contains were not all deposited at a single moment, but accumulated across an extended geological interval. Collection has also favored large, durable material. Teeth and large bones preserve and get found first. These factors likely contribute to the predator-heavy appearance of the assemblage. What the formation does confirm, with the material available, is the coexistence of multiple large predatory animals in the same general environment across the same time period. That picture is real, even if its full ecological interpretation remains a subject of ongoing research. This creates a question that the fossil record has not fully answered. How do multiple large predators, Spinosaurus, Dinosaurus, large crocodilians, coexist in the same ecosystem? The leading interpretation involves ecological partitioning. Spinosaurus, built for water, operating primarily in the river system, hunting fish, aquatic prey, animals at the water's edge. Dinosaurus, built on the standard large theropod template, operating primarily on land, hunting large terrestrial prey in the floodplain and forest margin. Two large predators, one ecosystem, divided not by territory in the conventional sense, but by the medium they primarily operated in. This interpretation is supported by the anatomy. The two animals are built for genuinely different roles. It is not confirmed by direct behavioral evidence. The fossil record does not preserve behavior. What it preserves is the presence of both animals in the same deposit, and the anatomical evidence that they were built to exploit different parts of the same environment. Now consider what Spinosaurus's confirmed size means in the context of that ecosystem. 14 to 15 meters in many current reconstructions. Mass estimates that in some models exceed T-Rex by a margin significant enough to place them in different weight categories if they were modern animals. In the Kem River system, in the shallow waterways and delta flats, Spinosaurus was operating at a scale that nothing in that environment was well positioned to challenge. Dinosaurus was large. The Kem crocodilians were large. But a semi-aquatic predator of 14 to 15 meters in shallow water is not a prey animal for anything confirmed in that ecosystem. It occupied the upper boundary. In a water environment, at a size nothing else in the mid-Cretaceous record approached from the carnivorous side. That is what the framing of this video means. Not that T-Rex and Spinosaurus met. They did not. They were separated by geography, Africa versus North America, and by roughly 30 million years. They were not contemporaries. They did not encounter each other. But the question the framing asks is real. In the hierarchy of large predatory dinosaurs, by confirmed length, by ecological position, by the scale at which they operated, Spinosaurus sits above T-Rex in the current evidence. Not in time, in scale. In the ecosystem that produced Spinosaurus, the Kem River Delta, with its multiple large predators, its enormous fish, its dense waterway system, was operating at a level of ecological complexity that the North American late Cretaceous, for all its famous predators, did not replicate in terms of large carnivore variety. The world Spinosaurus occupied was not the world of Jurassic Park. It was stranger, more layered, more ecologically concentrated. A river delta where the water itself was the most contested space in the landscape because the largest predatory dinosaur in the record was in the water. The Spinosaurus story is not finished. This is important to state clearly, not as a disclaimer, but as one of the most significant facts about this animal. More than a century after its original description, after the loss of the original material, after the 2014 revision, after the 2020 tail material, the Spinosaurus fossil record remains incomplete by the standards of well-known large theropods. We do not have a complete skeleton. The size estimates, 14 to 15 meters in many reconstructions, are derived from the available material scaled against more complete specimens and cross-referenced against body proportion models. They represent the best current synthesis of incomplete evidence. They may be revised as more material is recovered. The semi-aquatic interpretation, currently the dominant model, has been challenged by researchers who argue that some of the anatomical features cited in its support are open to alternative explanations. The short hind limbs that the 2014 reconstruction emphasized have been questioned by some studies, suggesting the proportions may reflect an immature specimen or a reconstruction artifact, rather than a definitive feature of adult Spinosaurus. The debate is not resolved. The semi-aquatic model currently holds the weight of evidence. But paleontology has a consistent history of confident interpretations being revised when better material is recovered. The honest position is that Spinosaurus is an animal we are still learning to see. What the fossil record has established beyond reasonable dispute, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus is among the largest predatory dinosaurs currently known, and in many current reconstructions, the longest confirmed. It was built with a suite of anatomical features that distinguished it from every other large theropod. It lived in a river-dominated ecosystem alongside other large predators. It appears, by the available evidence, to have been at least substantially semi-aquatic in its ecological role. Everything beyond those points is interpretation supported by evidence, not settled fact. And here is why that incompleteness matters beyond academic precision. Spinosaurus is one of the very few large dinosaurs whose story has changed dramatically within the last decade. Not incrementally, dramatically. The animal that appeared in popular culture in the early 2000s, based on the pre-2014 reconstructions, was a different-looking animal from the one the current evidence describes. Different posture, different proportions, different ecological interpretation. Possibly different in ways the next major fossil discovery will reveal again. This is what makes Spinosaurus scientifically important beyond its size record. It is a demonstration of how substantially our understanding of a well-known animal can change with new evidence. And it is a reminder that the most famous predatory dinosaur, T-Rex, is itself known for material that, while more complete than Spinosaurus's, still leaves significant behavioral and physiological questions open. The hierarchy of large carnivorous dinosaurs is not a settled ranking. It is a working document, being revised by every new find. The Kem beds continue to produce material. North African paleontology has expanded significantly in the last 2 decades. More field work, more institutional support, more collaboration between researchers in the region and the broader international scientific community. The probability that significant new Spinosaurus material will be recovered in the coming years is not small. When it is, and when it is analyzed, the picture of this animal will change again. It has changed before. It will change again. And each revision will make the animal more specific, more real, more strange than the version that preceded it. Here is what the full record of Spinosaurus actually shows. The predatory dinosaur, the fossil record currently places at the upper end of confirmed size, was not the animal the standard story prepared us for. It was not a scaled-up T-Rex, not a bigger version of the familiar predator template, not an animal built for the open-land pursuit that defines the popular image of large theropod predators. It was a predatory dinosaur, built around a lifestyle that was not primarily terrestrial, that took the body plan of a large theropod and directed it toward water, toward rivers, toward deltas, toward an environment that the other large predators of its world were not built to follow it into. And in doing so, in occupying that specific ecological space at that specific size, it became something the standard model had no category for. Among the largest predatory dinosaurs by length, built primarily not for land, T-Rex, in the late Cretaceous of North America, was operating at the top of its ecosystem in the way large theropods always operated, on land against large terrestrial prey, using the design that defined the group. Spinosaurus, roughly 30 million years earlier and a continent away, was longer by current estimates, and operating in a space that T-Rex's design could not access. That is not a competition. They never met. The framing of this video states a hierarchy, not an encounter. But the hierarchy is what the evidence describes. In the fossil record of predatory dinosaurs, by confirmed length in current reconstructions, by ecological position, by the scale of the environment it occupied, Spinosaurus sits above. And it does so by being something stranger than simply larger. By being the record of a predatory dinosaur that the lineage produced once, in one place, at one time, under one set of ecological conditions, and never produced again. An animal so specifically suited to its environment that when that environment changed, when the Chem-Chem delta shifted, when the mid-Cretaceous gave way to the conditions of the late Cretaceous, nothing like it appeared in its place. The largest predatory dinosaur by current estimates left no successor, no lineage that continued its particular ecological experiment. It appeared in the fossil record. It occupied its environment. It disappeared from the record. And T-Rex, arriving roughly 30 million years later in a different continent, in a different world, never knew it existed. What we covered today is the predator the fossil record currently places at the upper end of confirmed size. The evidence for it, the debate around it, the incompleteness of the record it left, and the ecosystem it occupied. There is another chapter in the story of large predatory dinosaurs that the standard account consistently underrepresents. Not about a single animal, about a group of large carnivorous dinosaurs whose fossil record has expanded dramatically in the last 20 years, primarily from sites in South America and Africa, and whose confirmed sizes and ecological diversity are changing the map of Cretaceous predator ecology in ways that most popular accounts have not yet incorporated. The specimens are well documented. The researchers are active. The picture they are building is considerably more complex than the T-Rex-centered version most people carry. We will go there next. If this changed how you see the hierarchy of predatory dinosaurs, leave a comment with what surprised you most. Was it the scale? The margin by which Spinosaurus exceeded the animal most people consider the apex? Was it the semi-aquatic evidence? The skull, the teeth, the tail, the picture of a predatory dinosaur of this size built primarily for water? Was it the incompleteness of the record? The fact that this animal, more than a century after its discovery, is still being understood? That tells us which direction to go next. And if you have not yet subscribed, this is the moment. Because the next video takes the predatory dinosaur story into territory the standard account has not reached. And we always follow the deepest evidence,